right, we're back again. This is still day one of the GoSec over a 2-day conference. So we're September 13th. I'm sitting down with Troy Vennon. Am I saying that right?
Yep, Vennon.
And Troy is actually with me. He's with GoSecure. So he's the Director of Service Innovation at GoSecure.
Yep.
So thanks for coming by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So this is your first time experiencing GoSec.
It is, yes. Certainly not my first conference, but
certainly not. You're definitely a well-versed traveler amongst different conferences.
Yes.
So what's your first impression of this event?
I think it's well attended. I think it's organized very well. I mean, Anne-Marie did a great job putting this together. You guys' whole team did a great job getting this stuff going. That's almost every session that I've seen. The rooms are well attended as well. So good content, I think, all in all. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's a good experience so far.
So as we're getting started, why don't we get a sense of what your role is here as Director of Innovation at GoSecure?
Sure. So my role at GoSecure, I came to GoSecure through an acquisition called Coveil, which originally started as an organization called the Columbus Collaboratory, right? Oh. And we were acquired into GoSecure for a number of reasons. I think one of them was some of the innovative technology that we built there. Like, how do we understand operational risk from vulnerability management program, which is generally hard to enumerate, hard to do. But we also at Coveil in the Collaboratory spent a significant amount of time thinking about how do we operationalize threat intelligence, right? Instead of thinking about indicators of compromise like IP addresses, domains, URLs, hashes of file hashes, how do we actually move up the stack so that we can talk about the motivations and the tactics and the techniques that threat actors use, because those things are a lot more difficult to change and how you behave. It's a lot easier to change where you're coming from than it is for you to change kind of your tendencies. And that's true in, I think, normal human interaction. It's also true in the way that threat actors behave, right? So what we were able to do at Coveil, and then obviously brought it into GoSecure, was take that understanding of who is a threat, why are they interested in us, do they tend to target specific industries over others, and then once we understand that about these threat actors, can we enumerate the way that they do the things that they do? Mm-hmm. And when we can get to the level where we can understand who our threats are, then we can actually begin having conversations about real risk, right? Businesses for years have understood the concept of risk and how do we communicate risk, but cyber risk is really hard to actually quantify.
Quantify, exactly.
For a number of reasons. I mean, from the very technical aspect of tools, technologies that exist, whether you're talking about a firewall, an IDS, or a vulnerability management scanner, or a web application scanner, those things produce much different sorts of data and different results than, for instance, your security program assessment does. Those things don't communicate well together. Mm-hmm. So my role, I think, at GoSecure is, given the tooling and the services and the capabilities that we bring to our customers, is how do we enrich each one of those services with the information of what another service has, and then how do we normalize the outputs and the results so that we can start to quantify and communicate risk to our customers.
And these conversations who would you say they would be held with? Because it sounds like it's very technical in nature, and I know that, as we know, that the decisions are always made by those with the money, and so COOs, CEOs, the person that holds the purse strings. All these people need to understand, where is this money going, and what are we going to get out of it, right?
Yep. So I think the whole point of what GoSecure we're trying to build is the risk level discussions that are held at the executive levels and then communicated ultimately to the board. Those cannot be technical discussions, right? And so it is, I think, historically very difficult to take what we call a technological or a technology control, like a firewall, a router, an IDS, IPS. Those are technology controls. And how do we communicate the operational risk from missing control coverage or ineffective capabilities of those tools? How do we then communicate that into a risk discussion with leadership? Right. And I think what we found, at least what I found, is MITRE ATT&CK is the bridge that allows us to communicate from a technology perspective to a risk decision maker at the board level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of MITRE ATT&CK, can you just maybe just give a little context around that?
Sure.
So just so people understand what that is all about.
Yeah. So MITRE is a quasi think tank federal government, the U.S. federal government organization. They've been around for quite a long time, but what MITRE did is it tries to help us understand the techniques and the tactics that threat actors use to be successful. So previous to MITRE, Lockheed Martin had come out with what they called the cyber kill chain, right? So the cyber kill chain was an effort to help defenders understand the things that threat actors must do in order to be successful to get to their goal, right? The Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain was good, it was effective, and then MITRE kind of took another look at that, and they actually went deeper than just from a tactic perspective, right? So what MITRE ATT&CK does is it identifies the 9 steps that a threat actor must go through to get to their ultimate impact and their ultimate result, but it enumerates the different techniques that a threat actor can use to achieve each one of those tactics, right?
Okay.
So when we understand that kind of view of, I call it the MITRE matrix, but when we understand that view of the threat actors' capabilities and how they achieve the goals that they have, then we can start to break those out and we can enumerate individual threat actors, right? Because not every threat actor is going to behave the same way.
Right, exactly.
Their skill sets are different, the tools that they leverage are different, their goals and the things that they want to achieve are wildly different. So a ransomware threat actor, for instance, someone that's operating a ransomware as a service campaign, their goals are much different than a nation state sponsored threat actor who wants to steal nation's state secrets. Their impact is going to be different. The way that they interact in the environment is going to be wildly different, and MITRE can help us enumerate specific threat actors through that framework, and then we can actually connect those techniques to detection capabilities on the technical side, and we can connect those techniques to the security framework side of the security program as well. So, for instance, if I'm a NIST CSF or an ISO or a CIS shop, depending on what I use, I can look at my security framework and the controls that it's asking me to implement, and I can apply those or I can map those to MITRE techniques. So if I understand who, say I operate in the financial sector, right? If I operate in the financial sector, I know that there's a certain subset of threat actors who tend to target the financial sector. Some will, randomly, but for the most part, that's what they do. And they have very specific techniques and tactics that they use. Then I can essentially model those techniques and those tactics against my control frameworks to say, do I need to focus more time on a particular control because that control is going to provide the coverage that I need to defend against that threat actor or that group of threat actors that I care about.
It sounds like this is really applicable to almost like I would say a certain demographic of prospect or client, right? So the big theme today is, speaking with other guests that we had on, was around the theme of SMB, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this would require a lot of hands-on ability to have a lot of resources within an organization to be able to manage this type of environment, right? So if we look at the perspective of leveraging MITRE and the tools that we're leveraging that we want to put forward to enable a company to address threats in an efficient manner, do you feel that an SMB or small business would be able to apply this? Because SMBs, they don't have the resources to do this, right?
Yep.
So how would this be applicable in that particular case?
Well, sure. I mean, mature organizations can and should be able to do this on their own. Operationalizing MITRE, the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you have to be creative in the ways that you do it. Now, when we talk about SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses, I mean, this is GoSecure's bread and butter.
Right.
I mean, we essentially bring the majority of the security stack to the table. from the endpoint detection, the managed detection and response aspect, vulnerability management as a service. You've got your cybersecurity assessments over here, which is going to evaluate the maturity of their security program. We got offensive testing, web application security testing. We've got, SIM as a service, firewall as a service. When we bring all of those capabilities to bear for these, for SMBs, we will actually do the modeling, right? It puts us in a position to leverage our own tooling, our own capabilities to say, okay, we understand the effectiveness of our MXDR service because we can model that. If I can identify specific tactics and techniques that I care about being able to detect and defend against, then I can throw automated attacks at it and I can validate that, yeah, this technology is 88% effective against this class of threat actors or this class of threats, right? So we can do that in fact, we do that with the GoSecure MXDR service, and then it really just becomes maybe a small professional services or an onboarding engagement to say, tell us about the rest of your security technology stack, right?
Right.
If we're not bringing the firewall to the table for you, what's your firewall?
Right.
What's your what's your IDS? What other sorts of technologies do you have in place in your environment? And then we can model those things, we can map them, we can create them. And then ultimately what this does is it puts us in a position where, given all of the things that GoSecure does for a customer, and given all the other technology that you have in place, this is what your control coverage looks like,
right,
compared to threats that you care about. You may have a gap over here, and then that very quickly becomes a quantification of risk. We can actually put numbers to it now, and then I can actually help an organization say, if you've got $10 to spend next year in your security budget, this is what you need to spend it on, because you don't have effective controls in place and you have threat actors who are interested in you and they leverage techniques that you can't defend against.
That's awesome.
Today.
That is great.
That's
what
the
they
story.
want to hear
That's
too,
the
right?
story.
Because it can be so overwhelming, right? To get all this information and to know where they want to spend those precious dollars that they have, right? Because companies still look at security as like, oh, well, it's, it's not really getting much ROI out of this until something happens, right? So it's good that we're able to pinpoint, this is what you're going to get the best bang for your buck at this time, given your profile. Yeah, so this view, I think, it answers some of the toughest questions for executive leaders to answer about a security program. Is, if I'm spending $1 million a year on this program and I don't have any, I don't have any incidents, to speak of, I have never had a ransomware, event. I haven't had any data stolen. Is it because my program's effective or I just haven't been targeted yet? Well, how do you know that you're spending the right amount of money and you're getting your return on investment? Right.
The only way that you can do that is if you can regularly evaluate the effectiveness of your tools. Right. And how do you know that you're evaluating the effectiveness against the right threats, right? So that's one aspect, is we can actually, with this approach of what I call continuous defense improvement, right? Where I'm doing this modeling in the center, understanding what the maturity of my security program looks like, the effectiveness of my controls and my tools, then I can tell you at the end of a year, Mr. President of the board, the $1 million we spent got us 85% effectiveness in our controls, right? So we can get to that point. And by the way, the other 15% that we're not quite effective, we may only need to spend $100,000 over here to get to where we want to be. Or does it make sense to do it? Do we care? I don't know. Right.
Let them assess the risk that what they want to take on. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'd like to obviously continue this conversation because I know there's a lot more that you have to say on the subject matter. But for this time period, we'll leave it there. But people can also find you on LinkedIn. Is there any other places? I know you do a lot of speaking engagements too. Is anything coming up that you're going to be involved in?
I don't think so. I don't think I've got anything scheduled. So Olivier and Andrian are doing a lot of conversations from the research side. They're doing a lot of conferences. I have not done any recently, but I do like to speak.
Maybe we can expect for you to do a talk next year.
I would love to. Absolutely.
Anne-Marie?
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to. Yeah, I would love to do a talk on this whole threat modeling.
Awesome.
View of what we're doing.
I'm sure we can make that happen for you.
Yep.
Troy, thanks a lot for coming by.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Please hang up and try again.